is the last part of a weekend conversation I had with Blake Larson and Alexander two close friends with whom we built some of the earliest rocket internet companies in Southeast Asia. Our path diverged quite a bit since the rocket internet. So Blake Larson led the international expansion of Lala Move from zero to multiple countries and very sophisticated operations. And Alexander Le, and he pursued multiple entrepreneurship journeys. In the third part, we talked about cultural differences in business management, expansion challenges and lessons learned, as well as personal growth and reflections in entrepreneurship. So we actually spent a lot of time over the last 10 years talking to each other, reflecting about the choices we've made and the lessons we have learned. I hope this discussion will be useful to you. This is episode 93 of the Impulso podcast by Momentum Works. Let me take the conversation back a little bit towards the people aspect. I mean, you are VQ, right? I mean, sort of second generation Vietnamese.
American-born Vietnamese, yeah.
Second generation Vietnamese migrants in America or America?
Oh,
whatever.
It depends what you want to call it. I was taught that I'm a first gen because my parents were immigrants. So
okay.
Some people call me second gen, but yeah.
Anyway, basically, you were parachuted into Vietnam, and you are American, studied in Spain, and parachuted into Hong Kong, and then eventually you went back to the US to try to replicate some of the business that you do in Asia. So I'm originally from China, in Singapore, and had a bit of experience everywhere.
You've been here, what, 25 years? 20 years?
I came here 24 years ago, and I moved away 5 times, collectively spent like 4 years outside Singapore, but eventually I'm back to Singapore. But I just want to take your perspective on how do you think about, I mean, all these differences in managing people, dealing with people. In early days, 2012 in Vietnam, Rocket had to hire someone who speaks English, right?
I think the one interesting feature that many, maybe Western audience might not know is that you can get away with speaking English in any country in Southeast Asia. You can live in a bubble if you really needed to. Right? There's always this base who's been educated abroad, has similar value set, has consumed the same media, right? So, but like early days, it's very hard to compare because there was nothing. Everything was literally we had to build from scratch. Like the first e-commerce delivery company, CS for commerce, regional retouching. Like these things just don't conceptually just don't exist.
Did you feel a bit of culture shock dealing with the Vietnamese, even though you speak Vietnamese?
I don't think so because there was enough poor people who you could hire like yourself.
Okay.
Where then it always starts at the co-founder level, and that really to me that really shaped the split between Zalora and Lazada in terms of culture, like crazy angry European culture versus like more like people like I don't know, like a VidKill who can connect with the locals better, and maybe we needed one or the other because clearly one did better than the other. So I don't know,
but also because of the macro, the circumstances.
Yeah, of course. So like, Foodpan was very German centric for even like today, it's like very led by Berlin. Right?
Yeah.
So
the Koreans lost the battle in the politics, which we can talk about. So.
Okay, that'll be interesting. Yeah. But like at least from my perspective, it was always very smooth. Like I never felt a jarring disconnect culturally. I felt there was enough in between worldness where you get the best of both, where I could manage blue collar workers because I could speak Vietnamese, but I also can deal with the higher ups, and then building a talent layer. Right?
Did you find it challenging to deal with the government?
I mean, I've had limited experience with that. I mean, like you get your raids, but then the key thing for Rocket early days, you need to pick a very strong local partner.
Okay.
Like in Vietnam, I remember sitting in the office with Ali and all the other guys who we were about to hire. Like, okay, we interviewed 2-3 guys. I was like, who do you like? We all had to pick and vote. And then clearly, he already knew his answer. I just want to see like what you think.
Yeah.
So, but then I think we all picked the right local like partner for Vietnam. It made like closing easy. It made opening new ventures easy. And I have heard so many disaster stories from like Indonesia, Philippines, whatever. Just like people disappearing with huge chunks of money and directors disappearing, right? Structurally, it was not a problem with regulators if you have a very good, especially in early days, the right person to handle it. These days, it's handled differently. With too much money, you hire a governance team. Right? You need very specialized people who are very well connected, and that requires a lot of money and specialty. Or you have to pick like very good partners already entrenched, and then you kind of work through that kind of model. And so it never, I don't know. I didn't have a problem. Did you have a problem? Like,
well, culture shock for sure, right?
Different from Chicago,
I'd been all over the world and traveled a bit, but like I'm still an American who doesn't speak Canto, and I'm still an American who doesn't speak Canto. But like, yeah, for sure, like Hong Kong is a very unique market in and of itself. However, like English, like for the most part, like you get around, like I used to be in British colony, so there's definitely some advantages, like in the sense like I can navigate that way. Managing the team wasn't as hard for me because I'd already managed and worked with people from all over the world. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I had to learn a lot of new stuff, but it wasn't uncomfortable to have to learn
Yeah.
new things. And like in some ways, it like being novel to the team and then in the market like was to my advantage. So I like we'd go out to like onboard drivers like at the gas stations because Hong Kong like right before they have two shifts for their
Yeah.
taxis.
Yeah.
They would line up at the petrol stations right before they would hand over to the next guy, and there'd be lines of like hundreds of taxis
Wow.
at the petrol stations.
And they're
so we would be, and they're not happy, not happy. And it's it's the middle of it's summer in Hong Kong. It's so humid, it's like
Yeah.
38 to 40 degrees.
Yeah.
And I'd watch my team. We'd, set up our banners and try to onboard the drivers. And like the drivers, they're so grumpy, wouldn't roll down the window. But then when they saw the white guy knocking, they're like, "What the hell is this guy?"
They're curious.
And so they're more curious because they're like, "What is this guy doing here?" And they'd roll it down a little, so at least I could get like the flyer in the window.
Yeah.
Where I've just like watched my local team really struggle with it. So like, it's a little bit of advantage to being novel.
Just a side note, lives of drivers in China now are better because they are driving electric vehicles. And a key advantage of electric vehicles is that you can stay idle while still keeping the air conditioning.
And in Hong Kong, they use liquefied petroleum.
Yeah.
And so it's not even like diesel or gasoline or petrol. So it's like anyway, yeah. And they had those like forever the old like Toyota Crowns that are around for like 1990. So it's very very unique dynamic there.
Then from Hong Kong to the rest of Asia, then back to the US.
Yes, I think early on at Lala Move, I would like really didn't know how to navigate all the different cultures. Not in the sense I was uncomfortable, but it's like how do you manage, right?
Yeah.
Because I say like, of course they're all different.
Yeah.
Of course they're all different. And I was like, all right. At first, you probably try to cater a little bit to, like that. Our Philippine was like super super fun. Singapore team was a little bit more quiet and like maybe or like like all the typical stereotypes come up for a reason about Southeast Asia, right? And so like you try to like manage your team under like with those differences, but then like that actually as you do more and more countries, it gets exhausting.
Yeah.
Because it's like you can't make a derivation of everything you do and how you communicate and be efficient, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so what we still did fairly early on, and I think it worked really well, and actually I stress this to founders that want to expand, is like, all right, let's stop focusing on what's different because we all know it's different. Like, of course we're different. Of course our Brazilians were different than our Chinese, which are different than our Mexicans and Indonesians. But like, okay, got it. Don't need to talk about it anymore, but what's the same? And so we really talked about like what we were trying to accomplish and our values.
Yeah.
Right. And we had the exact same 4 values from like day one of the company, which
Where'd that come from? That's because that's key.
just the management team. Xing had it, and then we like talked through them, and we picked values that were consistent with the business that we were in. So
it's probably quite rare for that to happen.
I think it is quite rare, to be honest.
It's quite rare.
Yeah.
But our thought process was like, we always use the example of like, if it wasn't the value of airlines to be safety, you wouldn't fly on that. So what were the ones that were important for our business? And like execution is one of them, right? So that was one of our values. And I won't go through all of them, but we hired for that. So like our whole interview process, every question, they wouldn't say like, show me an example of this value, but like embedded in every single question was one of our 4 values. And so we would interview for this. And then when we'd hire people after 3 months, I mean, depending on a certain level, we would do like, not a probation, but like just like a presentation, like what have you learned? And like we would, in that presentation, they were expected to show how they've demonstrated these values. And then performance reviews always embedded the values within the performance reviews.
Very smart.
And so what this did is the values became that common language.
Yeah.
And so when you go to communicate across markets that obviously are different, you now have a common set of understanding.
Yeah, correct.
And then those values became the language. And so like imagine like going back to the US, right?
You gotta translate that.
Yes. I'm like everybody's like, and it's middle COVID, right? And they're like Americans and like the Chinese is not a secret that like not best friends, right? Like at a like a media level, right? Like at the end of the day, we're all people, right? It's like, I don't know. It's like join a Chinese company, blah blah blah, and it's like, well, I'm American. I've been there since the beginning. And I was like, of course it's different, right? But what I can tell you is that it's not as important as these things.
Yeah.
And this is why they're important. And so like it's still it helped
Yeah.
And I think like we made it, and we're very transparent about it before you hire anybody, but like it still didn't mean it was easy. Like, right, that's the thing. It's like we create this common language, but like as a leader, like it's still exhausting to kind of do that. You do a lot of mental translation, and then you use those as your tools to then, after you've done the translation in your head of the differences, to communicate. And so like it works sometimes, it doesn't work sometimes. I would say definitely the US was the hardest. But I think there's a macro again, COVID at that time. Like there's a lot of social things in the US
that changed probably.
That changed a lot. Like, and I hadn't lived there in 10 years too. So I'd obviously gravitated east in like how I do things. And like I kind of fell in the middle. And I mean, I told you guys that story earlier. And like that was like mind blowing to me that like I was too easy on people in Asia and way too hard on them in the US. And I was like, well, I'm doing it the same, guys. And so even knowing all of this and being self-aware is still like there's still gaps that as a leader you really have to navigate.
I mean, also pretty depends on the business model because like I've been helping Sabrina launch her snacks business into the US and it's at a very high distribution level and it's extremely efficient. It's like the language of the way you do business here on a partnership level is the amount of face and talking around and dining and whining and just all those things, right? But you just always get to the point. Goal, okay, what do we need to do? Goal, okay, next. Like just keep doing that, and then you could scale very easily. So
can I ask you a question on that? Because I remember going to the US and like trying to bring on like third-party vendors for different things that we needed in business. And like I would get on the call with like the head of sales of a company, like, let's say our insurance broker, right? And they'd try to spend the first like 10 minutes talking to me about American football. And I'm like,
interesting.
They're like, oh, I saw that you went to Iowa. And I was like, yeah, that's 20 years ago. Like, I've got 20 minutes. I want this. I want this. I want this. Like, that was more the Asian part of me of like, let's get to the point. Like, I don't need these pleasantries. I don't need like, you don't need to be my best friend. I need you to, here's what I'm willing to spend. Here's what I need. Can we do it?
So it might be industry specific.
Yes.
Or also the media. Because a lot of the business transactions that we're doing are happening at expos.
Yes.
So like everyone's there for a purpose. The lists are the expos in America are just they're
crazy.
They're too massive. So everyone cuts out their map and who they want to hit. And so I think maybe that's why also. But apparently like Spring was something on follow-ups.
Yes, it's way more direct. No.
It's way more direct. Maybe because at the level their transaction they already like the expo cleared a layer. And maybe so rapport is not as much needed. Maybe in a different industry or context, they like to do American small talk, which is very
it's very common. So annoying, right? Like, I think once you get past that small talk, then it is much more direct. Somebody gave me some good advice once that like there's two types of cultures. Like again, there's obviously one's in the middle. Have you heard of like the coconut and the peach theory?
No, what is this?
So there's two types of cultures. There's the coconut and there's the peach. The coconut is like really, as you know, very, very hard on the outside, but super, super soft on the inside, right? And so that would be more like maybe like Chinese, right? Like it takes a long, long time to get in, develop a relationship, but once you have the trust, it's like for life.
Like the Japanese would do, but
or let's say more East, maybe not Chinese. But like in contrast, the peach would be like the Americans, which is like the small talk. Maybe the Germans are good coconut. Maybe that's it, right? I don't know. Maybe the Germans is a better example than the Chinese, right? But like there's cultures that really like it takes a long time to get in, but once you're in, they really like you're like family. They'll treat you, they'll trust you no matter what, right? So where there's like the peach, which is like the Americans, we're like all fuzzy and soft on the outside, and like you go to a restaurant, they all want to pretend like they're your best friend, but like hit of a peach is very, very hard. So like that's all surface level, and so it's so hard to actually be in forever with an American because it's a bit softer and kind of transient. Does that make sense?
Like, that makes sense.
At least, but it's anyway. So I don't know where I was going with that. I just think it was like an interesting way for me to like use that filter, like at least to start.
That's at least you're like, oh, you're a peach or a coconut.
Yes, because then that's how I adjust my approach, right? Actually,
correct.
And obviously, like all frameworks, is a starting point, right? For you to easily sort of find an anchor, and from this anchor, then you make adjustments. You don't stick to the framework, but framework gives you an easy way to say, let's start from somewhere.
And everything's a continuum, right? Like we always like to say it's black, it's white, but like the truth is, like everything's a continuum. But at least you do have those anchor points to have a filter of how to think about things.
The part you mentioned about Chinese business is, I think, over the last 20 years, things have evolved a lot. I mean, the traditional way of doing business is a lot of trust based, like all East Asian cultures. But now with all this competition, all this excessive focus.
Tell me about it.
Excessive focus on efficiency. I think things have become a bit different. I was
to the point.
I mean, some companies are very straight to the point. I was involved in the discussion. I will not name which company, but but between the board of a European company as well as the co-founders of a very large Chinese tech company. So as we sat down, the conversation went this way. The co-founder of the Chinese company was saying that, oh, remember co-founder and board level? So I should have prepared a company introduction, but since you know what we do, we know what you do, let's get to the business.
So said it with a smile.
She said it with a smile. I was smile.
I like that.
Yeah.
The discussion became very interesting because you really I think he was setting the context saying that, hey, let's not guess around what each other's intentions are. Let's try to focus on how we can work together.
Mm. And did you feel like there was honesty in that dialogue, even after prefacing it as we're going to be honest?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Okay.
From both sides, which I think setting the context is interesting because even you display honesty from this side, the other side might not perceive this way.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like the chess game, right? It's gamesmanship.
On this side, they laid out all their numbers, and I actually back checked the numbers like the same evening with some people who might know the sources. These guys be very honest with you. They're not bluffing about their stuff.
I have a question for you, Blake. So when you were launching Lala Move in the US, did you compare or think about comparing like against the Uber experience? Because Uber was very, like you said, you had trouble maybe translating the culture. There was some resistance in the team with the hard working elements, but like Travis Kalanick was able to kind of overcome that inertia, do you think? Like, because that was a very hardcore culture, right? So
it's like overcome the inertia of what? Like
maybe you're right because it's the macro of COVID, but like building a culture of hard work and like just no nonsense and just execution oriented, right? Because clearly you can do it, but
yeah, I found that like, you know what was really, really hard about that is I tried to instill that. And actually, when I interviewed everybody, I was explaining that like you're going to work harder. You're probably going to get paid less. You can, or not, you're going to get paid less. You can go find jobs where you're going to get paid more. It's a better way to frame that. But I promise you're going to learn, and I promise that like if you stick around long enough, you will be just amazed at what we're able to accomplish. Because I just been through that.
Correct.
And like that was total honest belief. But at the same time, I felt like I didn't really like buy into it entirely. You know what I mean? I pushed hard. I think that's what it was. It's like, it's one thing, Americans are like known for selling. Right. So maybe like, even though I was being honest, they really felt I was selling. But then like when my follow through of like, I show up at the office at 7 and I leave at 10. Because like I know what it takes to build it from zero. We have no brand, we have no nothing, we have limited resources. Even though the company's raised a lot, we still like pretend like we have nothing. And we got nothing actually until we proved ourselves. And I think that was a lot for a lot of the employees to digest, that like, wow, it can really be that way. And then I would keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And so, it was like a really, really hard transition, especially with COVID and like all of their peers were working from home. And like we were in tech, but it wasn't like sexy tech. I mean, it's like go put a sticker on a van. A sticker, I got a college degree. Like 10,000 stickers. Not like right? And so it's like, I think maybe in retrospect, like I didn't do enough job adjusting to the culture of like really explaining the why, because I thought maybe like me explaining it once or twice was enough to build the belief, and I didn't do enough actually selling.
Or you tell me, because it's your experience. Maybe it's because of the macro. There was a political element, and there was also a COVID macro element. But like, if you were able to continue, say these were not, like a black swan to you. If you had gone through a few more iterations, maybe you could have got to like that Uber kind of level. Maybe it's just you needed to cycle through it.
And honestly, I think part of the problem was that and this is my job, right? Like, it's not that I failed, but like I took every learning that we had done successfully across all these other markets and like playbook. And one of our values was don't recreate the wheel, right? Like just because you're smart, don't do something different. Like prove the thing that we've done doesn't work before you do something new. I stuck to the playbook, stuck to it. And like, what do like young, hungry people love? Growth. And when it doesn't, like, and because we're B2B more than like B2C, so you can't just put money on a problem and like have it result. And so like when it doesn't light, like fast, they're like, wait a minute. He said all these things and it's not coming true. And then they, you get those things in your head of like, well, my friends are kind of at home and DoorDash is doing really well. And like, it's COVID and like, I mean, I don't want to overly speculate, but fair enough that they like start to doubt. Then you have like, well, he said these things, it's not happening. And so like, it made it really, really a challenging environment, both from my side, but I mean, retrospectively, I probably could have been a bit more patient with their questioning.
You know,
but I knew that if we kept hacking at it, and at the end,
you would show them.
We would show them because I knew there was an amount of effort and not quitting that would get us there.
Yeah.
Even if we didn't get it right at the beginning.
Yeah. Right.
But like again, the peer models were Uber, DoorDash, Grub, like these things, these consumer businesses just. So anyway,
was it a cultural nuance thing that you could have adjusted slightly on the cultural side? That would have smoothed this, like the short term.
I think probably cultural a bit, but probably just better situational awareness of the macro things. I could have done a lot better. I just didn't believe in failure, but I also, not living in the US for a long time, I didn't want context to be an excuse for anybody, but I could have still acknowledged the context. If that makes sense.
That's fair.
Right? It shouldn't be an excuse, but I could have done a better job acknowledging it might have circumstantially the challenges that were against us. And then that would have probably brought us closer together instead of me pushing hard and then
easier to swallow.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, like that's the reflection I have. So
it's not hard science there, right? It's just each of us like figuring out what's the right way to do. I mean, making the mistakes, even though you are very experienced in doing something.
Yeah.
And learning from these mistakes, reflecting from this, and keep yourself open and just carry on with life.
Yeah. I mean, I beat myself up about it for a long time, but like it took.
You did?
Yeah, because I'm not there to make like people not like their job.
Yeah.
Like I'm there to do something amazing with these people. So that when you start to see this divide, and then like obviously there's macro things with Didi getting delisted at that time, and then like that's what caused the US business basically shut down. Like not directly, indirectly. The hardest thing for me in my career is like when I laid off the whole US team.
Yeah, it's tough.
In one day, because I said like, I know like this situation is really messy right now with COVID when I hired them.
Yeah.
I know that like there's this Asian company you've never heard of.
Yeah.
You say is big over there. Can you trust it? I don't, they don't want to trust it. They don't have any data points to trust it. But when I'd sit there and say, all of that, you can trust me. And so go back to the same people to put the trust in me. And then to fire them and let them all go. That was easily like the worst day of my professional career.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah,
it's a tough one. So I guess in your mind it was like a failure in some way.
It definitely wasn't the story I wrote when I moved to the US, right? Right, but like there's so much lesson in that. I'm not resentful, bitter, anything. I said like I was lost for a bit, but I think retrospectively that's where you find growth.
Yeah, correct.
It's hard things, and so
that's also something that dealing with lots of entrepreneurs from China who were perceived as being very successful. They were very successful, but I mean circumstances have changed quite a lot these few days, and obviously, I mean, whatever they do, the competition in China is fierce. And the growth is not there compared to what they would experience 10 years ago, or even just 5 years ago before COVID. And they have to, many of them have to expand their business outside to find growth. But that's like another sort of separate entrepreneur journey. And it's different from the first one because you're dealing with the market you're not familiar with. And you have this playbook, which you have spent so many years perfecting. And now you are in a position where you inevitably constantly thought about your playbook, constantly thought about, what I have done, was that pure luck?
Yeah.
But
I think if you have like belief, like there's always that like imposter syndrome, right? Even after success, you have imposter syndrome, right? Like I've kind of been out of the game a bit, and I look at all these entrepreneurs, I'm like, how could I do that again? But then like we look back at our track record, like not just me, but like us, and it's like, we've been okay till now. Like, why should I be doubting the future? Doesn't mean it's going to be smooth. Like we always forget, like,
that's true.
Think of like all of the times that you've actually failed to an unrecoverable moment in your life.
Yeah.
Anybody is a human, right? Not just tech entrepreneurs, but just like, and there's almost none of these. So like, why do we have such self-doubt, right? And so like, that is something that gives me like continual courage to like want to grow in different ways and to not have that imposter syndrome. And then like, sorry, I'm pontificating here a bit, but like also to realize that this is just one big fucking game. And so, and like in a good way, not in like a cynical way, but like once you realize, shape it. And it's like, all right, what game do you want to play?
Correct.
So your whole life, you're probably groomed in some way or influenced because you don't have enough reference points, enough experience. But like once that's the one thing about getting older a little bit is like, wait a minute, this is a game. I'll pick the game I want to play and then shape that game. And I don't think I realized like out of MBA, all this, like I did all the things I'm supposed to, go to Rocket, be an entrepreneur, but like is only through the reflection. It's like, I get to choose the game I want to play.
Correct.
And I think people forget this.
And enjoy that process along the way.
Yes.
Cool. I think we'll be talking for a long time. I think Joshua's getting nervous about the camera battery and all the...
Sure.
And I think his hard disk as well.
Circle.
You have come full circle, and it's been a very good discussion. It's been 10 years.
It's good to reconnect with you.
Yeah.
It's good to see you.
Yeah. So Blake is usually based in St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg, Florida.
Florida.
Not Russia, but clients from Russia.
Cool. Well, we'll talk about that next time. And
Yeah.
Alex is usually based in Malaysia, so now we're in Singapore. So
Yes.
yeah, and we should get some food.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joshua, for behind the scene.
Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed the last part of the conversation I had with Blake and Alexander. We are still grinding. We are still building things. After 10 years since 11 years after we first started building software rocket internet companies in Southeast Asia. And of course, there are a lot more reflections and anecdotes that we have, and we have been communicating with each other regularly. So I do hope that this is useful for you in your own journey. And do reach out to us if you want to have a discussion or if you have some personal experiences to share. I will see you in the next episode of the Impulso podcast by Momentum Works. Bye-bye.